thank you for coming out today. I'm Jerry Condon, President of Greater Seattle Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace is appalled by the recent actions of the FBI, and I'm going to read a short statement here from our National Veterans for Peace office in St. Louis, Missouri. Like other peace activists, Veterans for Peace is appalled by the heavy-handed actions of the FBI in raiding homes of anti-war activists. We would also be astonished by those actions were it not for the FBI's long history of harassing peaceful dissent. From the disgraced leadership of J. Edgar Hoover down to these 2010 raids in Minneapolis and Chicago, the Bureau has allowed itself to become the dark agent of stifling democratic opposition to America's embarrassing military adventures abroad and its resistance to equality at home. The idea that the victims of these home invasions are providing material support for terrorism by opposing brutal U.S. foreign occupations is ludicrous. It strikes at the very heart of the freedoms that VFP members thought they were donning the uniform to defend. For those of us who sought to protect democracy from alien forces, it is particularly disheartening to watch that democracy now being eroded from within by our own government. Are we truly to believe that the FBI is all that stands between us and the terrorism of the Quakers, the Catholic workers, Greenpeace, and people for the ethical treatment of animals, and I might add, labor unions, socialists, solidarity activists? It is furthermore than a little ironic that these raids of harassment should occur only 1 week after the Justice Department Inspector General himself concluded, I'm going to start that part over again. It is further more than a little ironic that these raids of harassment should occur only 1 week after the Justice Department Inspector General himself concluded that the FBI does indeed have a long, sorry history of baseless intimidation of dissenters to American policy. Veterans for Peace members themselves were victims of these actions surrounding the infamous police violation of dissenter rights at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Republican Convention in 2008. As veterans and as seekers of peace, we stand in solidarity with our comrades in sister organizations who are victims of this sinister FBI action. Who knows who its next target will be? Pressing our government to withdraw from aggressive and mindless wars should be viewed as heroic activity, not a hostile act subject to persecution. Thank you. So as you know, earlier this week, demonstrations against the FBI raids took place in at least 30 cities around the U.S., and they are continuing this week and into next week. Many people have come together to show solidarity with one another. This action here has actually been co-organized by Veterans for Peace and the Washington branch of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And I'd like to introduce its executive director, Arsalan Bukhari. Arsalan. How's everybody feeling? All right. So we have a statement to make also about the recent raids. The FBI has overstepped its bounds in targeting individuals based on their commitment to peacefully challenge U.S. policies in Palestine and Colombia. Contrary to the accusations that these individuals were involved in terrorism-related activity, they are known in the community as peace activists who fight to ensure that our country does not further human rights abuses. As a civil rights agency, we cannot afford to stay silent when a citizen's home is raided simply because he or she dared to practice their freedom of speech by voicing an opinion the government deems unfavorable. We must remind the government that its job is not to limit the things we say, but to protect our freedom, protect a fundamental right to say them. It is our right, in fact, our duty as citizens, to keep our government in line when it goes too far, and today it has gone too far.
What makes this nation great are our precious rights and freedoms afforded under the Constitution. We have the right to free speech and freedom of assembly. These raids, searches, and grand jury investigations come off as an attempt to limit these rights through the creation of a chilling effect. Even the Justice Department's Inspector General criticized FBI domestic terrorism investigations of nonviolent left-leaning groups. The Associated Press just reported yesterday that the Inspector General has called on the Bureau to discipline FBI agents and test them to see if they understand rules regarding surveillance on Americans without evidence of criminal wrongdoing. America thrives on the system of checks and balances. We understand that the role of the FBI is an important one, and FBI agents are at the forefront of fighting crime, corruption, and security threats, for which they must be thanked and supported. But what happens when there is a misuse of power within the agency? What happens if there is a bias or overreach? Who checks the FBI? There needs to be a stronger oversight and stronger controls over the Bureau's use of its investigative powers. We call on the Justice Department to immediately withdraw the grand jury proceedings of the anti-war activists, return all confiscated materials, and cease targeting those who exercise their First Amendment rights to dissent. Thank you. Who's next?
I'm Jane Cutter, and I am the Seattle coordinator of the Answer Coalition, and I'd like to read our statement. The Answer Coalition unequivocally condemns the FBI raids on the homes of anti-war and solidarity activists in Illinois and Minnesota, and the intimidation of activists there and elsewhere. The morning of September 24th, teams of FBI agents from the Joint Terrorism Task Force served search warrants and grand jury subpoenas on the activists, allegedly relating to political speech in defense of the Palestinian and Colombian peoples. The FBI subpoenaed around a dozen activists to testify before a grand jury in Chicago in October. They confronted and intimidated activists in additional states as part of the operation. The targeted activists have done no wrong. They are longtime organizers in the struggle for justice in the United States and against U.S. wars. They are leaders of organizations like the Twin Cities Anti-War Committee, the Palestine Solidarity Group, the Columbia Action Network, and the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, among others. Many of the targeted activists helped organize the successful mass mobilizations at the Republican National Convention in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2008. Now the government is attempting to implicate them in a bogus federal terrorism investigation. These allegations are baseless, reactionary, and wrong. The aim of the FBI raids is clearly the suppression of free speech and dissent. The government wants all activists to be afraid to speak out. I will add activists like us. But we cannot allow the government to stamp out, and the Obama administration's Justice Department is now leading the charge. We cannot allow the government to stamp out the right of the people to advocate for political beliefs that do not align with the aims of the Pentagon war machine. We cannot allow them to continue to erode our civil rights and civil liberties. Answer encourages all anti-war activists to follow the example of the targeted activists if you are confronted by the FBI or other political agencies. The activists have refused to engage in conversations with the FBI about their political beliefs and anti-war organizing. It is important for all activists and organizers to know your civil rights. People have the right to remain silent and to consult with an attorney. Even if the FBI shows up at someone's home or office with a warrant, you're not required to engage in conversation. It is better to say to the FBI and other law enforcement agents, let me have your contact information and my attorney will call you. People will gain nothing by engaging in discussions with FBI officers. Answer stands in full solidarity with our targeted sisters and brothers in the anti-war movement. We vow to struggle alongside them until the government harassment ends and they are completely vindicated. An injury to one is an injury to all.
Thank you. Next I'm going to introduce Doug Barnes, who I know from when we were both working with the Pastors for Peace, Friendship and Caravans to Cuba, so I guess we were supporting terrorism. But anyway, Doug is National Secretary of Freedom Socialist Party. Doug?
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks so much. It's really great to see all of you here and also see that there's been massive opposition to these raids across the country. 35 cities have had protests in a week's time, and there'll be more next week because of the grand jury that's supposed to start in Chicago on Tuesday. The FBI Gestapo tactics are an outrage, and I'm so glad that people have turned out today. The raids are an outrage not just because that they happened, but the way they happened as well. The fact that they came with guns drawn, dozens of agents swarming into longtime activists' homes, spending up to 12 hours going through their every piece of information, their children's photos, their poems, hauling off carts and carts of information from the activists. These bare-knuckle tactics by the Obama administration, they threaten everyone's right to dissent. And I think that we hold President Obama responsible for this and need to put the pressure on him where it belongs and the whole administration. They're continuing the dirty tricks of the COINTELPRO from the 1960s and 70s, which never went away. And even before that, in the 50s, the McCarthy era, our members have very long FBI files that we found a few years ago, and they haven't stopped. If you'll think back to the Domingo Viernes murders here of the cannery workers in the 70s that the FBI helped happen, and since then there's been more as well. Last October, the activist Phil Chin won over $400,000 for illegal arrest. The Washington State troopers arrested him while driving to Grays Harbor for an anti-war action, claiming he was an anarchist. And more recently, at the University of Washington, the police infiltrated the UW Student Worker Coalition, which is organizing to protest cuts last April against union workers and staff and students as well. From my personal experience, I know about the FBI's dirty tricks. During the WTO, the FBI came knocking on our door because we were organizing to defend the Cuban delegation which was coming here. We and two other activists all said, "Get away, we're not talking to you," and held a press conference. Went to Jim McDermott, and he called the FBI as well, so we put congressional pressure on them to back off. And we need to do the same thing here now in Seattle and every city where they're trying to do this. Just today we heard from the Alliance for Global Justice that their national co-chair, James Jordan, is reportedly one of the 22 people's names on the search warrants for the Minneapolis anti-war office. So the government's demanding access to all of his emails. So there's now, instead of 12 people in the last week, it's up to 22 people they've named, and the grand jury is continuing next week. He's someone that we corresponded with by email, most recently in support of the Colombian unionist Lilani Obando, who was jailed for documenting the military and paramilitary murder of farm workers in Colombia. They're hoping it'll have a chilling effect, but instead this has created a groundswell of outrage and opposition. Instead of a chilling effect, it makes me hot under the collar, and I'm sure all of you as well. Those targeted in Minneapolis and Chicago, they're not going quietly, and they're refusing to cooperate with the fishing expedition. In so doing, they're helping bring together the movements to fight the targeting of who the government considers the weakest links. The government doesn't have very good intelligence, so they're going after Palestinian activists, Colombia activists, and socialists like the Freedom Road Socialists. But a lot of those groups, and us as well, have worked in international solidarity with people that know a lot about police-state tactics, and we've learned from them. And we've learned how they fight them, and we'll use the same tactics here. One thing we've learned from privacy rights and free speech cases is that saying no to the government snoops at the top of our lungs, and rallying support is our best defense as a movement. Even if it means spending time in jail to safeguard our rights to organize without government interference and without turning over one bit of information. Thanks to the NLG for setting up a national defense of those under attack, and we need to continue to raise a ruckus about the grand jury that's supposed to start next Tuesday. I say know your rights, and we'll hand out flyers from the NLG that help remind us of those. the FBI return the stolen goods now. And the Obama administration stop the witch hunt, full restitution, and abolish the FBI and super spy agencies, along with their wiretapping, surveillance, and dirty tricks against movement activists. End the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, the occupation of Palestine, and U.S. support for repressive regimes from Colombia to our own Guantanamo.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Doug. Speaking of the National Lawyers Guild, Neil Fox from the National Lawyers Guild is here. Is going to have a few words with us.
Good afternoon. The National Lawyers Guild and its Mass Defense Committee provides legal defense and educational resources to activists, including those subjected to the September 24th raids and grand jury subpoenas in Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. The Guild denounces the attacks on free speech, freedom of association, and the right to dissent that these actions represent. The raids and summonses reflect an escalating hostility toward individuals and groups working in solidarity with the Palestinian and Colombian people, and their blatant political attacks on peaceful activists. That's the official statement of the National Lawyers Guild. I'm going to give an unofficial statement representing myself. Some of the activists who have been targeted for attack in the Midwest allegedly had ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP. The PFLP has been around for a long time. It's a Marxist organization that at times has been within the PLO. There have been splits with Fatah, but it is a secular organization. It is non-Islamist. It advances a Marxist agenda, and I guess, to me, to raid people because of ties to a Marxist agenda brings back the Red Scares, and it brings back J. Edgar Hoover's hostility towards the Communist Party and people who supported Marxism. And that's what this is about. This still shows an entrenched hostility towards socialism that's within the FBI. And I guess if the question is terrorism, why aren't there raids on organizations in this country that provide material support for the real terrorists in the Middle East? And I'm talking about the State of Israel that boarded ships in international waters, that committed acts of piracy, that murdered people who are trying to bring aid to the starving people in Gaza. Those are the real terrorists. Why are there not raids on the Jewish National Fund? Why are there not raids on those organizations that support the settlements in the West Bank? Why are there not raids on the real terrorists in the Middle East? The answer is obvious, because the Obama administration is supporting those elements, those terrorist elements, the State of Israel and the attacks on the flotilla. They don't want any dissent against those people in the Middle East that question the accommodation with the Zionists. So I guess I'm not really sure how to end this other than to say to the FBI, you better watch yourself, because we are keeping track of the illegal activities that you're committing. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I don't know, maybe we should give the FBI the benefit of the doubt. It could have been a big mistake, because I'm just on the website of Voters for Peace, and they have something there, hundreds of FBI agents. This just came out in recent days, another Inspector General report. Hundreds of FBI agents cheated on their domestic surveillance exams. The report described how they consulted with others while taking the exam, even though that was forbidden. Others used or distributed answer sheets or study guides that provided test answers. Still others exploited a computer flaw that revealed answers. The agents were being tested on 2008 guidelines that FBI employees must follow when conducting domestic investigations. So there you go. I mean, maybe if they did their homework, they would be following the Constitution. Next Saturday, October 9th, not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, is we're going to be marking the 9th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan and calling for an end to the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. This is an opportunity for all of us to get out and show solidarity with one another, show that we still have an anti-war movement that cares. So I encourage people to plan plan to be out there. The march, the rally is going to start at 1 p.m. on Saturday, October 9th, and then we'll be marching starting at 2. And quite a few groups are involved, but frankly, we need to do more the next week to really make sure that a lot of people come out and make a strong showing. Okay, the microphone is open, and representatives of other organizations who haven't spoken already would like to say a few words. Please keep it a little brief, briefer than Doug. And go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Helen Gilbert. I'm with Radical Women. And I'm here today because the feminist movement also has not been exempt from FBI dirty tricks. I remember in the early days of the movement, the FBI was intimidating feminist organizations for supposedly harboring political people going underground from the draft and other political dissidents. And there were grand jury witch hunts, and some feminist individuals thought they could play the game and give false information and really trick the FBI, and they found you cannot do that. You just have to not talk. As the previous speaker said, you can't play their game at all. When the FBI comes and knocks on your door, you tell them, I don't have to talk to you, and I'm not going to. Goodbye. When Radical Women was organizing to defend an Everett clinic that was firebombed repeatedly by the anti-life right wing, guess who came under attack? It was the feminists who were accused of perhaps targeting the clinic itself, and the far-right harassers who we knew and later were totally proven to be harboring the man who bombed the clinic were just left quite a bit alone. So everyone has a stake in standing up for civil rights, for protecting the most active in our community, and I do have to say, those who keep waiting for Obama to turn the page and do the right thing, you know, here we have another case. He's sabotaged abortion rights in the health plan, he's preaching Christianity from the White House, and now he's setting the FBI on activists. We've gone too far already with the Democratic Party. They are not the saviors, and let's look for some radical alternatives.
My name is Emma Kaplan, and I work with World Can't Wait. And I just want to say that this is a complete outrage that this is going on. This is an escalation against people in the anti-war movement and people who are speaking out against the crimes of their government. And this is something that should be opposed by anybody who thinks that the government should not be able to trample over people's rights and criminalize and intimidate and repress people for speaking out. Because this is what this is about. They're trying to send a message to people here. They're trying to say, don't speak out against this, don't give money to groups that the government doesn't like, or else we're going to come after you. And this is happening in the age of Obama. This is happening in the age of where the attacks on civil rights, some say, are being escalated even more than they were under Bush. If you look at what's going on with the Anar al-Qaeda, an order that Obama issued that said that he could assassinate any U.S. citizen that the government deems to be a threat to U.S. security. I mean, if you really look at all of this, it's a fascistic direction, and it's got to be stopped, and it's got to be opposed, and we got to make clear that we're not going to tolerate it. And this should strengthen our resolve to speak out and stop these wars once and for all.
It wasn't the FBI, but in 2005, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms invaded my house. At 8 a.m., as one of my housemates was leaving, they barged their way in through the door. They didn't have a warrant at all. They just forced their way in through the door. She was late for her bus, so she just didn't have the physical strength to stop them. They barged their way in. She did have the presence of mind to call me and tell me what was up. So I found them on the stairwell. They were actually out to harass another one of my housemates who happened to be a member of the Rainforest Action Network. Oh my gosh, yes. She thought that trees, old growth forests, should not be cut down. horror, such a subversive attitude that she had. They didn't have a warrant. They didn't even have suspicion of any actual criminal activity. All they were doing was harassing and going on a fishing expedition for environmental activists.
Yeah, they did.
We're taught in our schools that we are the freest nation on earth. We only know what our rights are when we try to use them.
I'm Ellen Finkelstein. I work with the Fellowship of Reconciliation. I'm going to take a page from Neil Fox, who spoke for the National Lawyers Guild, and say that there's been a national statement. Our executive director, who happens to live in New York, was in Chicago on Monday and was at the demonstration like this that was in Chicago. And it is clear that this is outrageous, that this is an attempt to silence people who are rightfully speaking out and engaged in what so-called democratic rights we have. Having said that, I'm going to step aside and be myself. I used to live in Chicago. 23 years ago, I too had a lovely experience with the FBI coming to my workplace. And what I took away from that experience, which was again an attempt by the government, a Republican administration at that point, but we see no difference today, to intimidate activists who were working at that time in support of people struggling for change in Central America. What I learned was it is absolutely imperative that people from all walks of political spectrum speak out and come together around this and say this is completely unacceptable. The other thing I will say is that I moved here 10 years ago. I know Joe and Stephanie, who were visited and whose house was ransacked last week. The kids' pictures that were taken from their house, I remember when that child was born. These are people like everybody here and people around the country who are simply trying to make a difference in this world and stand with people who need us to stand with them. And we need to stand with those who were subpoenaed, those who were visited, wherever it happens, and say this is not acceptable, not here, not now, not ever.
Hey, glad to see so many friends here. I would hope more people would be here because, if people show that they are not going to tolerate the complete decimation of, this false myth that we are free in this country, then they can get away with anything. And basically the government, in our lives, it's never stopped. We talk about COINTELPRO, but, we know that was real because they went in to the houses of the leaders and they shot them in their beds, And so what's going to stop them from doing that tomorrow? Because they're already just going into homes, taking what they want, and people can't just lay low. So I encourage people to just, go to the library, go online. Recently, ACLU, they were a little late because basically individuals kind of did public disclosure and started to find out the depth of what the fusion centers were up to and the meetings with Homeland Security, with the local police departments, who they were spying on, who they were looking at. Before the ACLU finally got their shit together and started looking into it. But now the ACLU here in Washington State is doing good work, and they recently just put up online previously redacted documents which show some of what has been happening from about 2003, 2004 until present. And you can read through those documents, you can see your names, you can see your organizations, you can see who they're looking at. And the organization I've been working at with in Olympia is we're an action-based organization. You may have a hard time finding us. We don't have a website anymore. Our listserv is barely used because one of somebody working with the Fusion Center and the government basically infiltrated our group and took, next thing you know, they are basically on the listserv. They're not only on the listserv, but they're weeding through and control the listserv and giving false information and to our people in terms of action planning. But go to that website and read through those documents. You'll be amazed. And find out where the local police departments are meeting with their Homeland Security meetings. They do it at least once a month. Be present there and do what you can to spread word. People need to stop and expose and say we're not going to tolerate this in the same way that they're not going to tolerate nuclear war. So, and it's only that resistance in terms of public opinion that prevents them, say, from a complete slaughter in the end. So everybody's manipulated through their ideology, believing this is a democracy. This is not a democracy. We are not free. So, and I just want to say, and then I'll go over the mic because I'm over time, but one thing that, reading those documents, several years ago as the Nazis came down to Olympia, I know a lot of you were there, they took over the Capitol. The Tacoma Police Department bragged in that Homeland Security document about how there was no concerns because we got the Nazis out safely before basically the peace and justice community could follow them. So you know whose side they're on.
Okay, thank you.
Just go to the Washington State ACLU and you'll find links there to recently redacted documents that came through public disclosure.
Okay, thank you very much. Got at least a couple other people who want to say a few words, so try to keep it a little bit short at this point, okay? You want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm John Norbert. I am the Socialist Workers' Party candidate for U.S. Senate. I'm very happy to have my campaign join you today in protesting this attack on civil liberties. This is the true face of the FBI. The judge that approved this is the true face of judges. The Obama administration is the true face of a capitalist administration. We know that from the early attacks on the working class by the FBI, you can go to the 1920s, the Palmer raids, whereas the big attacks on the working class. And this is what the capitalists fear now. They fear as their crisis deepens, as the depression deepens, as their adventures in war deepen. They fear that workers might resist. And they're trying to set an example. Again, I salute everyone here for coming out, and we must demand that an attack on one is an attack on all, and we need to fight for workers' solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, Veterans for Peace and others have been recently encouraging our soldiers, our GIs, down at Fort Lewis McChord to blow the whistle on war crimes, as did Bradley Manning. So yeah, some of us still have our whistles. I think we should blow the whistle on domestic crimes by the FBI here. Hurts, doesn't it? Okay, anybody else want to say something? I'm like, I think Como Radio is out here, but I don't see otherwise. We believe it. Several of the organizations involved here today sent out press releases to every media outlet in town. And where are they? I was reading the report from the action in New York City a few days ago to protest against the FBI raids. They had a very good action. No media showed up in New York City. So apparently the mainstream media is not interested in this story. Thank God for people like Mike McCormick, who's here, and people people will see that on his Talking Stick TV. It's at Wednesday evenings, I believe, now on Scan TV, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And also, you know, Mike's show on Saturday and Sunday mornings on KEXP from 6 to 9. So there's a few other alternative media folks here. Thank you very much for coming out. And we have to keep on keeping on. I understand that this is going to, we have to keep the pressure up. If it's like one day of a few protests, the FBI is not going to feel much heat. There are a number of organizations that are calling for ongoing actions. I see one of them here. Anyway, there's a call out, a national call out for call-ins to the Justice Department next Monday, demanding that all the property that was confiscated be returned. Okay, well, I'm useless without my reading glasses. So, at any rate, this is a very good start for Seattle coming together. We have a lot of organizations represented here today. It's a very good show of solidarity, and I think we need to keep it up. As I said, we should all be out on October 9th to continue this in an even larger way. It's possible that there'll be calls for nationwide actions even before October 9th as the grand jury proceedings get underway. So we will all keep in touch and make sure that we don't let this go, because, you know, Seattle could very, very easily be next unless we let them know that we're not going to stand for it. Thank you. You can go to a number of websites to find that out. Indie Media, Veterans for Peace, that's VFP92.org. Answer website, the Freedom Socialist Party website, and it'll be out on the calendars. We'll make sure that it gets around broadly. Also, this Gene Buskin's Peace and Justice calendar, the SNOW listserv, the Veterans for Peace listserv, and anybody else who wants. Oh, I should also mention the Council on American Islamic Relations will probably be having any announcements like that on their website as well. So, October 9th, we're going to be marching, we're going to be rallying, and we're going to be making lots of noise against the U.S. occupation in Afghanistan, and also we're going to be standing up for our own human and civil rights. It's not an act of terrorism to be in solidarity with the poor oppressed people in Palestine and Colombia. You know, who is really supporting terrorism in Colombia? Who's supporting a government and paramilitaries that systematically assassinate labor union leaders, systematically murder human rights activists? Our government is supporting that terrorism abroad, so it shouldn't be totally surprising when we see some of that repressive action starting to manifest itself right here in the U.S. We have to resist it very, very strongly. So thank you again for coming out.